Hey everybody who follows this channel, which from what I hear is mostly relegated to my sister. Simon here. Now, I know I usually do a discussion with George, usually on these sort of topics and stuff, but unfortunately he hasn't actually really played much of the Xeno series, so I'm not sure he's got a good amount of insight to help with this conversation. So basically, just want to give a quick channel update before I start. As you might notice, I've started doing a bunch of Xeno videos because I'm a huge fan of the Xeno series. It's probably one of my favourite series, if not my favourite series. And basically, I want to try and do some videos in the lead up to the release of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 coming out. So the first one I did was an evolution, so I'll do this one. If I get some time during the holidays, I also would love to do a top 6. I think there's 6 games in the series, so I don't mind talking about my favourite ones from the series. But basically, let's get straight into the video. Oh, and a warning for spoilers. I might be spoiling the plot behind several of the games in Xenoblade Chronicles story and Xenoblade Chronicles X's story. So I don't know where my viewers stand on the game, if they haven't finished it or want to finish it and stuff. You might be warned that I might spoil bits of the story. Alright, so basically, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was announced earlier this year, and I feel like I probably should have made this video back then, but now I've had a good look at E3, I think I can safely assume I know where this game is going. Basically, the first game in the series I played was Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii, and initially I didn't like it. I thought it was a bit but once I managed to get fully through the introduction, I got into it quite well because I love the story, and I pretty much played all through of it. And I'm one of those crazy people that plays through the entire game twice. The second time took me about 100 hours to do all the side quests and stuff. But I love the game, so much so that I went back in time and played some of the older ones, which is quite difficult here in Australia because none of them were localised. They were all localised to the US and not here, and it just baffles me. Like, you've translated it to English, can't you bring it to Australia or England or anything? It's ridiculous. But either way, I then got to try out Xenoblade Chronicles X, and I'm afraid to say, you might have seen it when you watched my Project Crosszone review, I was kind of disappointed with Cross, and it made me lose a reasonable bit of faith in the series. But then Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was announced, and my hype levels have gone through the roof. So in this video, I'm trying to explain why I didn't like Xenoblade Chronicles X, but why I'm also at the same time very excited for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, like probably even more hyped than I was for X, because I could see X unraveling to be something that wasn't Xenoblade Chronicles, why I can see Xenoblade Chronicles 2 coming out that way. So basically, over this video I'm going to talk about why I don't like Xenoblade Chronicles X, and let's start with the elephant in the room. It's not the censorship. I have friends who are massively anti-censorship, but I myself don't have a huge problem with it. Like, I think the removal of the bus slider was a little ridiculous, seeing as most games with customizable characters, which are girls, have it. But I, don't particularly mind the costume changes they made to Lyn in the game, because I'm partly a little bit of a conservative Christian, so I have these ideas that, I want people to be considerate. But either way, censorship was not the big killer factor, much like it was with Fire Emblem Fates. It wasn't the censorship that killed the game for me, it was other stuff. And I think I'll go with the big thing that really killed the game for me, and that was pretty much the characters and the story. Now, a lot of people who have just played Chronicles X will say, oh, the characters were great, oh, the story was great, but I don't think they've played the older games in the series. And a lot of other people will go, oh, but Xenoblade Chronicles is just one game, you can't define the whole series off one game. Similar arguments that are used for when you're talking about Super Mario Bros. 2. But even then, you can argue that because you've got Xenosaga and Xenogears, which have also got amazing stories and amazing characters, and Cross just comes up as quite lame. There's one of the big examples I think of is the villains. Like in Xenoblade Chronicles, you have characters like Metalface who keep showing up again and again, building character, and when you finally face him for the last time, it's this super satisfying battle between the two of you and stuff, and that's sort of an excitement. And it's even better in Xenosaga, where you've got some very well written villains, in my opinion. I just love the Testaments, the minions of the main bad guy. They have some pretty deep stories. You can understand where they come from and why they I like the way they are. But in Xenoblade Chronicles X, it's sort of just each chapter has their own special villain who just shows up for a little bit of time, and then you kill him, and then that's it. You don't really get to know anything about them. And it just, the story altogether just does not feel as grandiose and stuff as I would expect from a game in the Xeno series. And this pretty much will sum up most of the points I'll go through today, which is Xenoblade Chronicles X is not a bad game, it's just a bad Xeno game. Much like how I think Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is a great Wii game, even if it's not necessarily a great Zelda game. But it goes beyond the story. I actually think this game has a few problems that I want to talk about and why they annoyed me. And now there is the menu and customizations in the game. Like, I kind of get what they were trying to go with, some more of an MMO RPG sort of feel where you sort of can customize your character to your own specifications as opposed to be sort of given a pre-rendered character layout like you would in a normal RPG. But yet again, why did they do this if they didn't make the game a full-on MMO RPG? I still have suspicions that Xenoblade Chronicles X was meant to be an MMO RPG. After all, a lot of people considered Xenoblade Chronicles an MMO RPG. That was actually an RPG but wanted to be that. And I'm curious to know whether or not the Wii U's hardware limitations prevented the game being an MMO RPG. But still, it's like, if it wasn't going to be an MMORPG, I just don't get the menu system. After playing Xenoblade Chronicles, I knew how the battle system worked, and I knew how the customizations worked. Mind you, a lot of that was on my second playthrough, so maybe I should go back and play Xenoblade Chronicles X again, and maybe I'll get the menu. But even then, it gets more beyond than just, understanding how all the different customizations work, because I just get confused because it's just so much. But even the battle system. In Xenoblade Chronicles, I pretty much mastered the battle system. And what was good is if one of your characters got knocked out, you could sacrifice a bit of your party gauge and help bring them up. But the thing is, the gauge that you need to use to heal your party members mid-fight in Cross, I could just never seem to get filled up. And they were telling me like things like, oh yeah, use your regular attacks and do this and this and this. But I found there was like one class, I think it was the one that had the dual guns and dual swords, that could easily get that upgrade, but any other class could never get that bar to fill up, and as a result I basically never entered over limit, and I never healed party members, so pretty much as soon as the fight turned sour, I just had to get out of there, because if a party member went down, they were down. And it's just not even helped at the fact that the monsters in the game are completely unbalanced in my opinion. In Xenoblade Chronicles, since the game is linear, the enemies get harder and harder and harder as you get through the stages. So, around your opening area, they're only like level 1 to 5. But then as you get out again, they get beyond 5 to 10, 12, and then when you finally get to the last area, that's when you find the level 50s and 60 monsters. But Xenoblade Chronicles X, in this attempt to be this massive open world game, basically just shoved the enemies everywhere, and it meant that straight out of the base you could run into level 50s. Now, in defense, Xenoblade Chronicles did have this. They did have some very powerful enemies sitting very close to the starting areas. Like if you went across the lake at Colony 9, I believe, there was like an area full of level 30s to 40 enemies. But that was across the lake. You would not naturally go there unless you were really exploring. And so that's how I can justify that sort of placement. In Xenoblade Chronicles X, it's just like they've placed them everywhere. The best example of this bad placement, in my opinion, has to go to this one island off the coast of Coldros. Now, I believe it's Coldros, which is the volcanic continent right on the top. It's pretty obvious that's the last continent you're meant to visit. Like, it's sort of, you can see how you're meant to go to each continent one after another. But this one is like right up in the top corner of the map. You're not really meant to go there until the end. And there is an island off that continent. An island, so this basically is really, so you're in the farthest off continent on a far off island, and there's level 8 enemies there. Level 8. There is no way a beginning me is going to walk all the way from my base to the top of that island to find some enemies to fight. That's just stupid. By the time I get there, I've probably fought so many harder enemies that I've leveled up well beyond those enemies. That is just bad game design. I'm sorry. But it gets worse. Like, I still feel like it gets worse about the monsters. Not only are they bad placement, I just don't like how they're designed. Now, this isn't a graphical thing. It's more about their size. Something like a level 60 small enemy has less health than a level 60 large enemy. yet I'm pretty sure they give you the same amount of experience no matter what. And so you have your mechs, which are basically just more powerful versions of you, and so you basically find yourself having, you never really want to fight on foot unless you have to. You basically just go around your mech and try and find the smallest enemies possible, because that is the best way to get experience. You never want to take on the larger enemies unless you have to as part of the story. And like, I just don't exactly like how it works I don't think RPGs work as well in the open world setting. I still think that Xenoblade Chronicles X took the fall, so Zelda Breath of the Wild could be the success. I still feel like Xenoblade Chronicles X was sort of like the explorer, like trying to see how the open world system works and what they can and can't do, so it had all the mistakes, so that when Zelda Breath of the Wild came out, it could fix them all. But it just upsets me because, I like Xenoblade and I'm not a huge Zelda fan, and I kind of wish things happened differently, but I think I should go on to some more nitpicks I have on the series. I know you might be getting a bit upset if I stop bashing the game, and I still think it's a good game, but I've got to have to get through a few more of these things. Another problem I have is the lack of EXP sharing. Now, this is kind of weird because every other game in the Xeno series has had this. When you defeat an enemy, your party, the characters that are with you, get the most experience. But at the same time, your fellow party members who are in the reserve or on the bench will also get experience. Probably not as much, but I think actually I think it might be a bit elastic. Like, they'll sort of stay with you, so that when you switch over to them, they're only like 1 or 2 levels behind you. It's weird because Xenogears, all 3 Xenosagas, and Xenoblade had this. Yet Cross didn't. If I was not playing with the character, they were their base level. Which would often mean you'd go back to base and go, you know what, I'm probably finished with Lyn, I'll pick up Arena or Gwyn, and they're like 20 to 30 levels behind you because they got no experience from all the fighting you were doing. And you're like, oh, you can bring them up to scratch with just by finding monsters. It's like, yeah, but you're basically sacrificing a party member. It's just annoying. A good example, I would have to say, is the Etrian Odyssey series. Now, I've played 2 games in the series. One was 4, which was one of the main series games, and the other one was Mystery Dungeon, which was a spin-off. Mystery Dungeon had an EXP sharing feature, and as a result I got a lot further in the game and enjoyed it a lot more because I didn't have to constantly go back to base and switch characters out and then have to retrain my characters because they were completely under level. It just feels weird. Now, continuing with the nitpicking, another thing I had to talk about is the aliens in the game. And what better place to start with than the Nopon? Like, I thought the Nopon were kind of cool. I'm not a huge fan of the cutesy, cuddly characters in these video games, but I still think Ricky was a cool, pivotal part of the Xenoblade Chronicles cast. And when they introduced Tatsu, I was like, alright, cool, another Nopon character. But not only is Tatsu not playable, he is one of the worst written characters in the game. I'm seriously, like, he's comic relief and he does nothing. You can't play him. I want to say I'm not a huge fan of when they introduce just comic relief characters or just talking characters who do nothing. You probably have played RPG games with, Navi's probably a famous one, although I'm not sure how on earth Navi would be a playable character in something like Zelda. But like, it just kind of annoyed me, like, in general about Tatsu in general. Just, he's just annoying and you couldn't do anything with him. Even though he had like what looked like 2 sticks in his back, every time a fight would break out, he would just disappear and you'd have to fight with everyone else. It's just, no, it's not fun. But there's other problems with the alien characters as well, in my opinion, that there's just way too many of them. Like, I think a good example is maybe something like, you've got Mass Effect, where they've introduced a lot of alien species, but, they've each got a lot of detail and lore behind them. Now, maybe I didn't read all the lore and stuff in the game, but I just found that they were just shooting off new alien species left, right, and centre, and I was just like, completely overwhelmed that there were just way too many characters. I'm like, okay, so there's this alien species, and there's this alien species, and these ones have this one gimmick, and this one has this gimmick, and in the end I just found it got a bit lost. And this actually takes into another point I need to take, which is the evolving world. In Xenoblade Chronicles, we had this amazing world that was evolving. Like, over time, things would happen, and I think if any of you guys remember the big event at the end of, I think, the second act of Xenoblade, right before the final act, You know what I'm talking about, what happened, right? A whole section of the world was cut off from you, and you could feel that the world had drastically changed. There wasn't really any of that in Xenoblade Chronicles X. There was a few times where things would be built and some new characters would be hanging around the areas that you've started off at, but the world just never really felt like it was evolving. And so, basically, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. So I think I'll just go on to my last point of why I'm not a huge fan of Xenoblade Chronicles X. And that, of course, is the music. Now, the Xeno series has, of course, started on Xenogears on the PS1, which had MIDI files that were I would still think they're pretty good. Like, if you listen to I love some soundtracks like, I think Fuse, which is like one of the action themes, and Night of Fire, which I think is the boss theme. There's some pretty amazing themes. You go on to Xenosaga, which I will admit has one battle theme, which is good, but rather annoying when you have to keep listening to it every time you get into a fight, but the music is still pretty good. I'm not the biggest fan of Xenosaga 2's music, but then you get to Xenosaga 3 and Xenoblade, that's when the series, in my opinion, hits its height. That music is incredible. Then you get Xenoblade Chronicles X, which I just find it so cheesy. I just can only listen to some of these songs for a few times, especially things like the flying theme and the original battle theme. It's just lyrics, no. Like when you put lyrics in the final credit music, it's amazing. And when you put like choirs and stuff, it sounds great. But when you put weird, look, I know the guy. Wait, I brought up Wikipedia. It's Hiroyuki, I think his name is, and I think I know he's pretty famous for working on several animes like Attack on Titan and Kill la Kill, and I respect him as a good musician, but I just don't think he should have done a Xeno series soundtrack. It just doesn't fit with him. And so between the music, the world not evolving, there being sort of way too many aliens and no playable Nopon, the storyline being a bit disappointing, and there's basically a whole lot of things that I just irritate me when I'm playing Xenoblade Chronicles X, and it's basically hindered my enjoyment of the game. But I feel like a lot of things have got to be changing with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and one of the big changes with that is its name. It's Xenoblade Chronicles 2. This is no longer a spiritual sequel. This is a direct sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles. And I'm hoping it goes back to what, in my opinion, made that game great. Let's just start with the music. For composing it, they have brought in Yasunori, I think his name is Mitsuda. And this man is definitely, I'm pretty sure, the right man for the job. Now, he's most famous for Chrono Trigger, I believe, but he's also the composer of none other than Xenogears and the first Xenosaga game. So he's actually done Xeno games before, and he also did the end credit music for the first Xenoblade Chronicles, Beyond the Sky, if you've ever heard that music, which I think is a lovely end credit theme. So, and if you've listened to some of his music, which I think I'll be trying to play underneath this video if I can, it sounds amazing. The music for this game sounds amazing. And plus, we're already seeing that the characters have, emotions on their faces, which was solely lacking in Xenoblade Chronicles Cross. And looks like there's going to be a big, grandiose story. Everything about this game looks to be going back to what I liked about Xenoblade. Now, I can't prove it's gone completely back there until the game comes out and I've had a chance to play it, but generally this game looks to be the Xeno game I want. The one with the big stories, the amazing characters, the amazing music, and hopefully, bring back some of the more nitpicking things I said. So, hopefully maybe cutting down a bit on the alien races or the other races, or even if they don't, just giving them a bit more description about them and more than just one character trait. Hopefully the monsters are balanced, since it's probably going to be a more linear game. We'll probably get enemies getting harder over time and not just running into level 50 enemies straight out of the gate. And, one of the big things I really hope, if you guys are worried about censorship, this is Nintendo of Europe we're dealing with here. They did the original one, and last I checked, the original game did not have massive censorship problems. So even if you are worried about that, I don't think we're going to get too many problems coming out of this game from that angle. So in all this general sense, I feel like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is going to be an amazing game, and I'm really excited for it. Now, if you want, you can comment on other problems, other things I might have missed in this video, because Xenoblade Chronicles X is a very large game, there's a lot of things to talk about. But I hope I generally got my point across about why I'm very excited for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but not so excited for Xenoblade Chronicles X. Thanks for watching.